What's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the first and long college football show. We are on our countdown to kick off for the 2024 season, and what we're doing is we're taking a look at all the teams that we feel like are the most intriguing heading into the season, and teams specifically that we feel like have the best opportunity to affect the college football playoff or make the college football playoff at this point in our countdown for a lot of these teams. We're at number 7, and we're talking Penn State Nittany Lions football. Mason, how are you today? You ready to talk some Penn State?
Yeah, man, doing good. It's going to be an interesting year for Penn State. It feels like it's now or never to make the college football playoff. Um, it's the I think that this team has put together so many 10-win seasons in a row, or just in general under James Franklin, that now is the time as the college football playoff expands to 12 teams. Now is the time for this team to take the next step, and I'm anxious to see if they're going to do it. It's kind of put up or shut up year for James Franklin and this Nittany Lion team.
Yeah, this team has won just about every type of New Year's Six bowl game that you can win. I think they've literally almost won every single one of them, and none of which were college football playoffs. And it's been the same speed bump that this team can't quite seem to get over. And look, I don't think there's any shame in it. I'm not one of these people that's like, James Franklin needs to beat Ohio State and Michigan this year. He needs to get out. I'm just not one of those people. I mean, that's a tall
Sure.
task. I mean, Michigan and Ohio State, they don't lose to anybody. It's not just Penn State, right? So, um, it's a tough situation. You're right on the verge of making a college football playoff, and as you said, the 12 team is here. And if that had been around, this team, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But it would just be a different conversation, Mason. That's how college football goes, and fans want results and championships. And this team has not won necessarily championships, but this has been a really good team over the last few years and very, very consistent. Um, we'll kind of jump into James Franklin, and as you can see his record there on the screen, 88 and 39. Um, as I said, this has been a really consistent program, recruited really well, right around top 15 level. There in 2022, you'll see at the bottom of your screen there, top 10 class there, number 7 class in the country. And those are, I believe, according to 24/7. The transfer portal rankings are not a big transfer team. I mean, they'll go and get guys that are necessary, but making most of their hay from high school recruiting. No doubt. And I think that's what the best teams in the country do, and they go and they fill holes with the best guys available through the transfer portal, and that's kind of the approach that I feel like Penn State has taken over the last couple of years. But as I said, Mason, the biggest mark, negative mark on this team's record over the last few years is what you'll see in the bottom right of that slide there. It's the record versus rivals, and that's what everybody's talking about. Since 2020, 0-4 against Ohio State, 1-3 against Michigan. I mean, that's really where the conversation ends. That's what's been holding this team up, man, and keeping them from getting where they wanted to go. Um, I'll add this one thing that I think is pretty huge for this team going forward is getting rid of East and West divisions in the Big Ten. You had Penn State crammed in a division with Ohio State and Michigan, and in the East there. So the West was it was totally lopsided. The West had no offenses to speak of last year. It was really unbelievable. If you go back and look at it in that West side of the conference, I believe there wasn't a team that's averaged over 25 points a game, on offense. It was horrible, horrible.
Yeah.
So I feel like this does balance out the conference a little bit. You obviously have the conference realignment. You're going to have, some road trips longer road trips than what you're used to. There's going to be some change there, playing in some stadiums that you're not used to playing in. And I'm talking about the California schools and obviously in the Oregon school. I think it's going to be a nice change of pace for this team. You get out of that monotonous schedule of playing those same big boys every year, and I think it may give this team an opportunity to kind of bolster their record. But Mason, what do you think about last year? We're going to go into the offense here in a second. That's pretty much what the only issue this team had. This defense was crazy last year. Well, and if you're new to this channel, I hope that you'll hit the subscribe button and come back and hang out with us. We're doing college football Power Four coverage wall to wall. We're about to get the season kicked off. We're within a couple of weeks of kickoff by the time this is released. Come and hang out with us on the First and Long College Football Show. I'll kick it over to you, Mason. What do you think about last year, and take us into the offense as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, last year this defense was incredible. I was really high on this Penn State team last year. I had them picked to make the college football playoff and beat either a Michigan or Ohio State. That obviously did not happen, and I think a big reason for the lack of success in those bigger games was because Penn State did not play like they needed to beat Michigan and Ohio State in all the other games. And what I mean by that is they didn't pass the ball as much down the field with, this incredible 5-star quarterback that they saw fit to go out and get in Drew Aller. Um, you saw a lot of dinking and dunking from him and a lot of running the football in those games that they were against opponents that they should beat. And they did that. They averaged over 36 points per game. I mean, had a great offense outside of the two losses in the regular season. And in those games, they averaged 13.5 points. And what you really saw was Drew Aller not being able to rise to the occasion. But I don't think that's because he's a terrible quarterback. I think that the coaches did him a disservice by not allowing him the opportunity to get those reps that he needed in the games of lesser value, I guess, and really perform in a way that he would have to perform in those bigger games against better defenses. And so to me, that was kind of the tale of the offensive side of the football. But defensively, I mean, this was a top 5 unit in the country, I think, and I think that they proved that. Lost a pretty good bit to the NFL draft last year. Defense may take a step back this year, but could still end up being a top 10 defense. And I think that they've got a lot of really good pieces on that side of the football. Overall, that's not going to matter if this offense takes a step forward. And let's get into the offense here to figure out if that's even possible, considering what they have and the pieces around Drew Aller.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. You bring in offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, and he comes over from Kansas, by the way. If you've been under a rock, Kansas has been. Look, I guess you didn't have to be under a rock to have missed Kansas necessarily. Not a lot of people, I don't think, are freaks. Maybe like us. Maybe if you're watching this, you are, and if you are, you need to subscribe and come hang out with us. But we've watched Kansas football over the last couple of years and fully understood the prowess that's went on the offensive side of the ball. And Andy Kotelnicki has been a guy that's been as close to that as anybody, other than maybe the head coach over there, I guess. But look, if you look at these numbers, obviously the passing yards are a concern. Anytime you're outside of the top 50 in anything, it's amazing. It's a major deficit, and it's especially on offense. You can't have any balance this way. It just throws everything off. But would you believe that this offense actually led the Big Ten in scoring last year?
Right.
But to kind of put a cherry on what you were saying earlier, you only scored 12 against Ohio State and 15 against Michigan. And then you absolutely beat the bejesus out of all the teams that you should beat. It was a thing last year if Penn State wasn't playing Michigan or Ohio State, to pick them in the spread.
Yeah.
That was a thing. People were doing that last year, and it made some people some money. because this team just absolutely beat the crap out of teams that they were supposed to beat. Um, Look, you can look at the numbers from 2023. As I said, what really just stands out to you is the passing yards, and whether it's play calling. I hear a lot of people talking about Drew Aller. He wasn't the most accurate quarterback in the world. We'll transition over into quarterback, but it wasn't just him, man. It was play calling, and that's why Mike Yursich was fired after the Michigan loss last year. So um, it, for James Franklin to fire somebody, I just feel like you'd have every chance in the world before James Franklin would fire you, right? Um, and obviously just had to wipe his hands of that guy. So Drew Aller comes back. You talked about the high recruiting ranking that he possessed coming out of high school. Doesn't get a whole lot better than that, right? You'll see it on your screen there to the bottom right. That's his 2022 recruiting profile. 6'5", 238-pound junior from Medina, Ohio. 60% completion percentage last year. Not horrible, but there was just it was too inconsistent. There was games. He started off the year, Mason, the very first game of the year last year, like 80% completion percentage, over 300 yards. So everybody, and it was against a no-name team. I can't remember who it was. It was nobody, but it had everybody sitting there thinking, okay, here we go. This is what we got. The next game it was 200 and something yards. Then it was 190. And it was 150. And then there was a 3-game stretch at the end of the season where he didn't even break 100.
Yeah.
So, look, he protected the ball really, really well. Okay, only 2 interceptions. I think that's a nice. He just did things like the opposite of what you would think a young guy would do. You'd think you'd need to. You want your young guys. I feel like I'm not some kind of $1 million head coach or something. But your young quarterback, you'd rather have to tell them whoa than have to tell them to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so we need to see some kind of aggressive nature from Drew Aller and this coaching staff. I think we're going to see it more with Kotelnicki. We're going to talk about wide receiver in a minute. It's not a strength for this team, that's for sure. Kotelnicki is really good at scheming people wide the hell open, scheming them open, not relying on them to go one-on-one and make a play and get open, because I don't think that's what this wide receiver room is. We're going to get to that in a minute, but we can't help but talk about them a little bit whenever we're talking about quarterback. What's got to get better with Drew Aller this year? What are your expectations for him this year? I just, maybe he's just not as good as what we thought he was coming out of high school, or there's a little more to what was going on last year, and we're going to see Andy Kotelnicki come getting it straightened out. What do you think's going on, and what are your predictions for him in 24?
Well, I'm not ready to deem Drew Aller as a DJ Uiagalelei failure type quarterback, after one season. I mean, I understand the scrutiny and the criticism for sure, but this is a tough position to play, right? It's the toughest position in all of sports, and I think that he did a decent job last year, considering the fact that this offense did not allow him to take opportunities downfield. That was not their MO. That is not what they wanted to do. And I think that Kotelnicki coming in, you're going to see more of an average depth of target from this offense, and you're going to see you're going to see Drew Aller protected a little bit better with the way that the offensive system is run, with more RPOs, pre-motion or pre-snap motions, and a little bit more kind of smoke and mirrors. You kind of dress things up just a bit and protect your quarterback. I really liked what Drew Aller did last year, though. He had a 1.1% turnover. I forget the actual name of the stat here, but it was a turnover prone rate on throws, 1.1%, which is really good, especially for a first year starter. And 60%, you definitely want to see that go up on a completion percentage. But he was a top 20. He had a top 20 passer rating last year in the entire country. I mean, that's not bad, especially for a first year guy. I think that I really feel like what you're going to see is that the offense did a disservice to this guy, and I'm hoping that he sticks around for a senior year. I think he'll need it. But in year one under Nittany, you should see an improvement. In year two, this guy could be elite. With this offensive coordinator, if James Franklin is able to hold on to him, which he's been through 3 offensive coordinators in the past 4 seasons, and interestingly, nobody has been an offensive coordinator under James Franklin for more than 2 seasons. So hopefully he's found his match, and he's going to be able to stick with this guy for a while. But behind Drew Aller, I think that Nittany kind of has the quarterback that he would prefer to go with, someone who fits that Jalen Daniels archetype in Bo Pribula. I hope I'm saying that right. But he was, and he only completed 52% of his passes last year, but he did have 4 touchdowns on just 11 completions with an average of 10.9 yards per attempt. Also, but I guess what's interesting about this athlete is that he's an athlete. He had 56 carries last year, 329 yards, and 6 touchdowns on the ground, which is an average of 5.9 yards per carry, which is better than both of your running backs. So I think that you do see him in some packages. I think you see Bo Pribula come in into some packages with this new offense. I feel like Nittany's going to want to incorporate what he had, in Jalen Daniels, in Jason Bean last year at Kansas, and Pribula gives you that opportunity. Obviously, Drew Aller, he can run when he needs to, but he's not a dual threat. Certainly not like Pribula. So maybe we see a little bit of him coming in behind Aller some, and then heaven forbid you see Ethan Grunkemeyer, but he was the number 8 quarterback in the country last year, number 103 nationally, and somebody who I think Penn State fans will be looking forward to in 25 and 26, or 26 and 27, 27, 28, somewhere down the road, right? We don't want to see him this year with the quarterback talent that's already filled the room, but I'm excited for these guys in this new offense. I think that I guess there's always that concern when a quarterback is taking over a new offense to understand the system, right? But I think based on what I know from Nittany, that this is a pretty simple system to get and understand, and you should see returns in year one. And I think that Penn State fans are gonna welcome that for sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Nittany kind of plays the hand that he's dealt here. I'm just interested to see how it works out. I mean, we don't know. We literally don't know. We're going to have to wait till August 31st or whatever it is, September, to see, because he did a whole lot of inside run stuff with the quarterback, and I'm interested to see how that translates to this offense, because I don't feel like Drew Aller is that guy, right?
Right.
I don't want to see this guy on a ton of designed runs. I just don't. But anyway, we're just gonna have to wait and see on that whole thing. We really don't know, and we're not gonna know for a little bit. But I know Nicky's a good one, and we'll see what this has been. Death row for offensive coordinators, as you've said. So we'll see. We'll see how it works out for him. Let's jump into the running backs, Mason. You got 2 really, really strong ones. Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen. These 2 men don't need a whole lot of introduction to Penn State fans, obviously. 753 yards rushing last year for Singleton, 902 yards last year for Katron Allen. Singleton had more receiving yards out of the backfield, 26 receptions, 308 yards. Couple of touchdowns there. I like these 2 guys a lot, but there is just not a whole lot behind them. If you can keep these guys healthy, then This is really, those two guys are a really, really good 1-2 punch, right? But I don't see a ton behind them. You do have incoming freshman Quentin Martin that kind of figures to factor in maybe. I've heard less about Corey Smith, but he's also a 4-star that comes in as an incoming freshman. You've got redshirt freshman Cam Wallace. He'll rotate and he'll get some carries off the bench, but um, you got two bona fide studs. You've got a backup guy to kind of float around, and then you might have some freshmen, right? Maybe you got a couple other players kicking around, the roster there. But what do you think about these guys? I love the prospect of these two guys, but we know how physical running back is, especially in the Big Ten. You'd like to have one more in the chute, I feel like, with some experience. But as far as your top two guys, that you couldn't really ask for more, I don't think, other than with these two guys, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the best 1-2 punches in college football for sure. I don't think either of these guys are like, future first round picks or anything like that. This isn't a Saquon Barkley situation, but
No.
this gives you a nice little duo here at running back and some consistency, guys you can count on to tote the rock in certain situations. It's look two really good running backs in a offense that has leaned on the running game very heavily in the past few years. And honestly, one of the things that makes these running backs so I guess comparable is the fact that they're able to run the football well and catch the football out of the backfield. I think that these are two similar type of running backs in that sense. You've got kind of all-purpose backs who can do both. Nicholas Singleton had 308 yards receiving last year and 486 yards after contact is really impressive as a running back. 23 missed tackles forced, and then you go to the backup in Katron Allen, and he's even more elusive. Had 556 yards after contact, 37 missed tackles forced. So those are really really good numbers. Those players are starting on just about every other team in the country, both of them. So, but as you mentioned, the depth of this room I think is lacking. You have Cam Wallace to rely on, who redshirted last year. We don't really know much about him at all and what he's going to do and be able to produce. But a former 3-star guy, and then you've got a top 150 overall freshman in Quentin Martin, and another 4-star in Corey Smith. I think you'd like the opportunity to redshirt at least one of those two, and then you're because you're going to use four running backs in a season, right? I don't see them relying on a walk on or anything like that. So I after Cam Wallace, who's going to be that next running back up? Probably Quentin Martin. But and who knows? Maybe he shines in fall practice, and he's a guy that you just can't keep off the field. Maybe he ends up taking the number 3 role. But I think that it's fair to point out and question the depth of this unit for sure.
Let's jump over into wide receivers, Mason. This is the biggest concern on this team, bar none. Me and you were talking before we started recording here. We record these things and we release them out on a schedule and everything. So as we're recording it, we're talking on the video, getting our morning groggies out, right? Getting our day voice from our morning voice, right? And we were talking about this wide receiver room, and this is the biggest concern on this team. It remains to be the biggest concern on this team. You do go and get a transfer in Julian Fleming. It seems like he's best in a complementary role as a wide receiver. Now, this team needs him to be more than that. I feel like I don't feel like that's a stretch to say. This team needs him to be the guy, and I'm not sure that he is that guy. I can already see that I messed up on Caden Saunders. That's on the right side of your screen there. I messed up on his statistics. But Harrison Wallace, Caden Saunders, those look to kind of be the other starters with Julian Fleming. coaches are liking Amari Evans. You got Anthony Ivy and Liam Clifford are some guys that return and will rotate as needed. They're not returning starters. And then you've got Tasir Denmark, a 3-star, coming in as a freshman. But I mean, there's not much of a downfield threat here, Mason, and it's concerning. We talked about Kotelnicki and his scheme. His scheme certainly does. Whenever you watch games that Kotelnicki calls, it's one of those things where it's like, how did that guy get that wide open? And that's what this team needs. They need a coach that's smart enough to figure out, okay, we got to figure out a way to get this guy the ball in his hands, easily and quickly. And that's going to be the best bet for this team. Somebody's got to step up as that number one guy, and I'm just not seeing him yet. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. But I'm just not seeing it yet. What do you think about the wide receiver unit? There are some tight ends that we're going to get into here in just a minute. But probably the best receiver on this team is a tight end.
Yeah.
So anyway, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that that says more about the tight ends than the wide receivers sometimes. I mean, we see a Georgia program who has featured a tight end for so long and, then be at the top of college football. But it's also, I guess, I'm saying that the tight end could be the best player on this roster. It isn't also saying that this wide receiver group isn't bad because it's kind of bad. Realistically, it's not deep. There's no true number one receiver. Julian Fleming is a former 5-star guy, former number one wide receiver in his recruiting class, a guy from Pennsylvania, so he's coming back to his home state. But I think that he's more of a complementary piece. At least that's what we saw at Ohio State. I'm anxious to see what he looks like in a featured role. Also, Julian Fleming has not been healthy his entire career in college, and from what I'm hearing out of camp, he feels like he's as healthy as he's ever been, as healthy as he's been since high school. So that could play into his favor and play into this season a little bit, but anxious to see what he does. I think you have to circle him as the wide receiver one at this point. But Harrison Wallace is another player who it's from all accounts last camp. The coaching staff had circled this guy in Harrison Wallace and said, this is our number one receiver. And then he gets banged up and battles injury. We saw Lambert Smith kind of take the ball literally and run with it. So I'm anxious to see what he does in a full healthy season, hopefully. But I think that without having those two receivers, if they get dinged up, if they get hurt, you're in a lot of trouble because there's not a ton of depth in this room. They didn't go out and get a bunch of transfers, which I think they should have. They didn't go out and get a bunch of 4-star wide receivers, which I think they should have. And now you've built this. It's almost like a backlog of bad receiver play, and this perception is what recruits are seeing, and that's why you're only able to get 3-star wide receiver recruits right now, because people know that this Penn State offense has featured the running back more than receivers, and receivers don't want to play in an offense that they can't really play in, and I think that that's what you're seeing. But just really kind of disappointed in the offseason recruiting of this staff in this unit, and they're really not doing, they're not doing Drew Aller any favors by getting him more weapons. I think that they just kind of remained stagnant with what they had, and got Julian Fleming and said that'll do. And I'm not so sure that it will, considering what they lost.
It's the adage as old as time, Mason. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? And
Mm-hmm.
that it's a conundrum that happens in college football. It seems constantly these days, and it's like we're Georgia fans. We're guys that are from Georgia, and it's something. This is the exact same conversation that we've had as Georgia fans about our own team. You know, what comes first? Wide receiver success or really good wide receivers? What comes first? Where do you start? And you know, Georgia has proved what their process is. I mean, they'll take a walk on and turn him into an NFL draft pick that's playing for the Chargers this year, right? Um, and that's what you're going to have happen at Penn State and say, look, we can take what you are and turn you into what you need to be in the NFL. And that's going to have to happen a couple of times before people are going to have faith that it can happen. And so um, this wide receiver room is at a crossroads. This coaching staff is at a crossroads with wide receiver. There's got to be development here, and if there's not, it's gonna potentially cost this team this year and going forward. Let's jump into the tight ends. This is a strong group for this team. Tyler Warren making his return is certainly notable. We talked about that probably the best receiver on this team is a tight end. Um, 34 receptions, 422 yards, 7 touchdowns. Really, really good tight end here. You've got a nice combination of guys here on the screen. Khalil Dinkins, um, Andre Rappleyea. I don't know how the hell you say that name. Um, but these guys, I think, complement each other all pretty well. You've got some blockers, you got some pass catchers, you've got, I think this team is going to be best served to run a lot of 12 personnel this
Yeah.
season. I think that I don't think that's a stretch to say. You got to figure out how to get these tight ends on the field. And before we started recording, you had talked about a guy that's coming in as well that's making a huge splash and everybody's really excited about. What do you think about the tight end room? Tell us about the good news coming to this room as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a deep tight end room here in comparison to the wide receiving room. This is a very deep unit. You've got more tight ends that can actually play than you do wide receivers. It's a little bit odd,
Very weird.
but Tyler Warren is a dude for sure. This is a unit that lost Theo Johnson last year, so you're going to see more production. Or not necessarily more production, but you'll see more opportunities be spread out through this unit. And that's where Khalil Dinkins kind of comes in potentially. Guy who had just 5 receptions last year, but 2 touchdowns off of 5 receptions. It's not too shabby, and a little over 10 yards per attempt there is really good as well. So anxious to see him get an increased role, but the tight end that I'm most interested in is Luke Reynolds. He's a former 5-star, number 1 tight end in the country, and he's definitely going to see the field. Went back and watched some of the film. Played a lot of quarterback at his high school in Connecticut, which isn't great football, like in a ranking of football states. I don't think Connecticut would be in the top half, but Luke Reynolds was a man amongst boys. I saw him plowing some dudes over, and just showed some real baller mentality there. Great size, great speed for that size, and I think that he's going to be a difference maker this year in the tight end unit. We could see Khalil Dinkins get leapfrogged here pretty quickly in the season, potentially.
Good group. Good group. Got to figure out ways to run this offense through 12 personnel. Forgive me. Tell me in the comment section, Penn State fans, how much did Kotelnicki run 12 personnel at Kansas last year? That would be something that I'd be interested to know, and I didn't look it up.
You would think it would fit well with an RPO system.
You'd think. Yeah. Uh, let's talk about the offensive line. This has been a strong suit for this team over the last few years, and Phil Troutwine, a ex-offensive lineman himself at the NFL ranks, has done a good job with this team over the last few years. You cut back on sacks a lot versus the years prior to this, the 2 years prior to this, just about cut the sacks in half, and that was good for second fewest in the Big Ten. Um, and you do have some answers here. Look, Drew Shelton there at the left of your screen. He'll be the left tackle spot. He filled in for Fashanu, who all Penn State fans know Fashanu, a guy who was just drafted. Um, Big shoes to fill there. But Drew Shelton filled in for him during injury last year and did a nice job and really made a name for himself on this offense. And um, while he was held out of the spring with injury, I think that he'll end up being the starter there for his junior season. And going over to left guard, I've seen lists that have JB Nelson as the starter at left guard. I've seen uh, Vega Ione as the starter. So between those two guys, I feel like you've got a kind of a floater at the guard spots because I feel like Sal Wormley is a for sure starter at the right guard spot. So between JB Nelson and Vega, I feel like you've got a starter at left guard there and then a floater to kind of float in between at those two positions. And not to mention, some of those guys can play center as well. So the interior of the offensive line, well, Nick Dawkins is going to play center. The interior of this offensive line, I feel like, is in pretty good shape. It was the tackles that are the question. I feel all right about Drew Shelton, even though he's not a returning starter or anything. I feel decent enough about him. Left tackle's a hard position, though, man. Um, but right tackle is still kind of up in the air. And again, you have options. You Donko, Rucci, those are really the two guys that are battling it out, it seems, for that right tackle spot. But you've got freshmen coming in Williams and Cousins that are, especially Cousins. Cousins is making a lot of noise. And for all intents and purposes, sounds like maybe he'll be, if not a starter at some point, he'll at least be the utility guy on the ends to help out with Drew Shelton and whomever it is that ends up playing right tackle. Rucci was the guy from Wisconsin that transferred. He was a former 5-star, but just never really panned out, I guess, as a starter for Wisconsin. But has that 5-star potential. Anytime you can add a 5-star to your offensive line group, you're going to do it. I like the size of this group. Everybody seems to have the adequate size to play their position. There's tons of highly ranked dudes in this room. There's some returning talent. All in all, I'm happy with the offensive line considering what has been lost. There might be a little shuffling around early in the season or in fall camp, but all in all, I feel pretty good about this group. What do you think about the offensive line?
Yeah, I tend to agree with everything you said. I don't have a ton to add there. I'm anxious to see what Nolan Rucci does. I think he's kind of the biggest question mark. Because if he lives up to his 5-star billing, I mean that completely changes the outlook of this unit as a whole. But we can kind of gather after 3 years of seeing him in college that may be a little bit of an optimistic standpoint, and he may be serviceable at best. So anxious to see what he does. It's odd to come over from Wisconsin to Penn State and be a starter immediately, even though Wisconsin has kind of owned that unit for a while in the Big Ten. They always have great offensive line play. But ultimately, as this unit, the outlook of this unit is that there are really 7 guys that I think you feel pretty comfortable in. The 5 that are listed there, and Cooper Cousins, who sounds like he's just absolutely playing lights out in camp and putting on a show as a true freshman, which is really encouraging to see. And then JB Nelson. So to me, anytime we do these breakdowns, I say you need 7 or 8 offensive linemen because one of these guys will go down with injury at some point. And I think Penn State has that from all accounts. But an unproven unit, losing 3 starters off the offensive line is never going to be easy. But I think that they've managed it pretty well from what I can tell so far. We'll have to see how the season goes.
Yeah, and Donko there that's competing at right tackle. He played in the second half of the Peach Bowl and um, did pretty well. Not bad. And Penn State didn't win the game or anything. I mean, it Ole Miss ended up winning, but he did a pretty good job. And so we'll see what that translates to in 2024. Let's jump over to the defense. Mason, you got Tom Allen coming over to coach this defense after the departure of Manny Diaz to go man the wheel over there at Duke. So some coaching dominoes fell, right? And I feel like Penn State really just kind of reloaded at defensive coordinator. I mean, you get another head coach as your defensive coordinator and a group he inherits. Yeah, you lose some talent, no doubt about it. But this was one of the best units in college football last year, as you can see from the stats that are there on your screen. And you do return 72%, right? Is that correct? Make sure I didn't leave a typo in there. But I mean, you do return enough that I feel like this is going to be a stout unit once again. But you name the statistic, man, they were pretty much all over it. Number one in the country. What stands out to me? Number one in the country in rush yards per game allowed and rush yards per carry allowed. And I mean, those numbers are staggering, absolutely staggering. If we can get some kind of semblance of this and an uptick, really just in the passing game for the offense, everything else was good. The passing game was just such a deficiency that it caused this team to be, you know, one a one trick pony, if you will. Um, but we're done with the offense. Let's go back into the defense. Really good defense. I expect really good things again this year. Let's just go ahead and jump into the defensive line. You move Abdul Carter from linebacker over to defensive end. He's going to be an edge rusher. He's going to get after the quarterback. Um, I'm neutral on the thought of this. I hate to, I'm the type of guy. Let's don't fix something that's not broken. But at the same time, I'm going to trust Tom Allen's thought process on this over mine. Abdul Carter is a hell of a specimen, and I'm sure he's going to excel at this position. Danny Dennis Sutton is going to be on the other side at defensive end, and then you're going to have kind of like a committee approach there at defensive tackle. You got two defensive ends solidified, it seems to me. Zane Durant, Devon Ellis, or I guess when you look him up, it's Devon J. Thomas. I don't know if you tried to look that guy up, but
yeah, change his name.
Okay. All right. I was about to say either Ellie's is his alias or his government name. I don't know what the hell. But nonetheless, he's going to probably be your opening starter, but you're going to see rotations between Hakeem Beamon and Keziah Izzard. They're going to rotate in at defensive tackle. So you got four solid dudes. Liam Andrews, a four-star, comes in as an incoming freshman at defensive tackle, and then Malachi Williams. Heard less about him. I'm not sure if he enrolled early, but he's a four-star defensive end, and will work to get some playing time if he can. But I don't know if that's going to happen behind these guys, barring crazy injury. No, I think this is a really good defensive line. I don't think it's the greatest in the country or anything, but it's top 25. This is top 25 worthy defensive line, in my opinion. Especially adding Abdul Carter to the room, right? What do you think about the switch for Abdul Carter, and what do you think about this defensive line?
Yeah, I mean, really, really solid pieces at the defensive end positions. I think you've got a for sure first round talent in Abdul Carter coming off the edge, potentially the best defensive player in the country in Abdul Carter. I tend to lean towards the Tennessee defensive end, who I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but anyways, I think that Abdul Carter is an absolute specimen, and moving him down, I think, is more of a position opening up in Chop Robinson leaving for the NFL than it is, him changing from a linebacker role to defensive end. I think he's always been most suited to play and on the defensive end and play the pass rush better than than he can the run, I guess, in a sense. But in saying that, I mean, he also had 23 run stops, which led the team last year. But on top of that, also a 20% pass rush win rate from this guy, which is insane. Had 18 quarterback hurries as a linebacker, which is really good. With 48 tackles, 5.5 tackles for a loss, 4.5 sacks. I think that all of those are great numbers, but they're going to go up. Minus maybe his total number of tackles coming off the edge. But I think that he's going to be a guy who pins his ears back and is able to just go out and get the quarterback. So really excited to see what he does in a new position. Opposite of him is Denai Dennis Sutton, who's a former 5-star guy. I remember his recruitment because he was a guy that Georgia really wanted, and Georgia doesn't miss on too many defensive players that they want. And this was a pretty big miss for them. But 26 tackles last year, 6 tackles for a loss, 3.5 sacks, 19 quarterback hurries, 15.9% pass rush win rate. He's going to get more opportunities this year, and I think that he's another guy who you could see their stats kind of open up a little bit, and also another guy who could be playing himself into the first round this year. I think he's got that type of talent. And Devon J. Thomas playing at defensive tackle, I think that he kind of holds this unit together pretty well. And is sort of an anchor in the interior defensive line. A guy who got overlooked, I think, a lot last year on such a stout defensive line with the two talents that I just mentioned and Chop Robinson. But he's a defensive tackle that is better than just a guy for sure. I think he's a future NFL player. Coming in the middle of this defense, but I really like this unit as a whole. I think that they're deep. I think that they've got opportunities for NFL playmakers to get more stats, but also for younger talent to come in and play in some roles potentially, because there's a lot of talented freshmen coming in as well. Maybe they get some opportunities this year.
Let's jump through these linebackers and secondary, and then we're going to get the schedule on the screen, and we'll break it down and give you guys our predictions for the 2024 season, as we like to do at this point in the year. Linebacker is an area where you've got a guy like Kobe King. I feel really good about him at the inside spot. And by the way, this team is going to run some 4-2-5. So I set these slides up like 4-3 style, but you will see this team switch to a 4-2-5 when they feel necessary. So you're going to kind of see 4-3, 4-2-5, multiple defense type stuff with Tom Allen. But Tony Rojas over there at outside linebacker with Dominic DeLuca. The two outside guys are super energetic guys, ball hawks, as you can see. Ripping the ball out, getting interceptions at outside linebacker. That's always interesting to see. Super energetic guys, and then you've got kind of your thumper there in the middle with Kobe King, 59 tackles, which was one of the best on the team as far as tackles last year. There was a lot of guys with 40 tackles last year, right? 30 tackles, 50 tackles. This was one of the best defenses in the country, and there was lots of statistics to go around. So you got Tyler Elston and Keon Wiley. They're reliable reserves in this unit. Kayvon Keys, he was a redshirt freshman. He looks to play a larger role this year as well. So you've got six dudes in this room. And at times you may only need 2 on the field at a time. Or maybe you see one of those guys go play some nickel. That's very, very, very possible. But anyway, I like this linebacker room. I feel good about it as well as I feel good about the defensive line, as well as I feel pretty good about the secondary. We're going to get into that in a second. What do you think about the linebackers? I don't have a ton of concerns here.
No, I don't either, and that's saying a lot because I think that this is kind of the worst unit on the defense. But it's a really good defense, so that's not a knock on these guys. I think that it's tough to scout. I guess these middle linebackers when you have such a good defensive line in front of them. But
Sure.
to me, I think that Kobe King is kind of the player that stands out. Obviously, he's got the most production, but just a ball hawk, kind of flies around the football, and he was second on the team in tackles with 59, 6 tackles for a loss, 1.5 sacks. 23 run stops, which was second on the team, or actually it was tied for first with Abdul Carter, and had an average depth of tackle of 2 yards past the line of scrimmage. So really stepping up and making those tackles when needed, when running backs or whoever got past that defensive line, which wasn't very often last year, but he was able to come in and jam them up, and um, just really excited to see another season of him as he's going to be playing himself onto an NFL roster as well. And Tony Rojas is just a young guy. He's a true sophomore, played as a true freshman last year. So super talented and should produce this year as well. And we'll see probably a sophomore bump this year and see him flying around the football and playing himself into the future Kobe King position and middle linebacker. I think he's got all the talent in the world. So excited to see him as well. But kind of a thin group, I guess. We'll have to. You've got three good middle linebackers here, so I don't know that you necessarily need to dip into the reserve roles very much, especially when you're talking about switching to a 4-2-5 occasionally. You give one of those linebackers a break every now and then, but you've got three solid pieces right here, at least in the unit.
Yep. And let's talk about secondary, Mason. This is the group that you felt like you needed some help after last year, after some of the guys that depart and things. You go out, you get a guy like Jalen Kimber who started every game for Florida last year, and then you go get a highly touted, maybe unproven fella in AJ Harris. Um, there's competition a little bit, I think, still at least one of the cornerback positions. It seems like it's Jalen Kimber's position to me. From what I can gather reading, it seems like AJ Harris is pretty much set at his spot. I may be wrong on that, but it's spring ball. We still got fall camp. But Jalen Kimber seems to be the one in competition with Cam Miller, who's the veteran returner. So I don't think you can really lose there. I think there's enough competition where you got guys pushing each other, and that's good. Um, little concerned with the depth. If you have injuries, I'm a little concerned, frankly, with AJ Harris. We don't know. We just don't know. It's not that I'm concerned with him. There's something that I know about him that I'm concerned about. It's just, I mean, this guy's played in 7 games in his career. Um, as I said, former 4-star guy, highly touted. He comes from Georgia, which is a football factory at this point. Um, you know what his discipline is probably going to be like. You know what his body's probably going to be like. His mental capacity for the game, probably pretty sharp in all those categories. What does it translate to on the field in the Big Ten? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. Um, Kevin Winston, Jalen Reed, you got to feel pretty good about those guys playing safety, especially Kevin Winston, um, who is going to be able to be a vocal leader on this team and in the secondary, and probably going to be your voice of wisdom and reason back there in the back and coordinating and showing people where they need to be. You do have some incoming freshmen, Vabu Toure, 4-star safety, and then John Mitchell, 4-star cornerback coming in. We'll see if those guys can contribute at all. They at least will provide some depth, in a break glass in case of emergency type situation. What do you think about the secondary? I don't think there's like a weak part of this defense, honestly, Mason, as we kind of round out the defense here. And before we look at the schedule, I don't think there's really that much of a weak spot on this defense. We'll have to see it in action, um, and see how these corners hold up. But feel pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel really good about this unit. AJ Harris was a guy coming over from Georgia who was a kind of a fringe 5-star. Um, had a 5-star at one point, lost it by some recruiting services, but I think he composite ended up as a 5-star. overall, and none of that matters now. He's in college, and he got to college at Georgia and was really playing himself onto the roster as a true freshman, which is really tough to do. So he's a guy who, after the season last year, I was really looking forward to seeing him get an increased role. I mean, I think he's on pace to be an NFL guy, potentially a first rounder, but got kind of stuck behind a logjam at Georgia in the DB room there, and I think he made a pretty smart decision to jump ship there and come over to Penn State potentially. I mean, he also could have been starting for Georgia this year, so we'll have to wait and see on him. He is unproven, but I like him as a prospect. I like him as a starter at Penn State this year. Jalen Kemper is actually another Georgia transfer. He was at Georgia before Florida, and was a guy who really just kind of struggled to put on size. I think they have him listed at 188. I mean, that's probably soaking wet. He's 188, but he's a very slim guy playing that cornerback position, and kind of struggles to play the run. I think that's the only concern for him, but very very twitchy, very quick, and great against the pass. So I think that there will be a battle between him and Cam Miller this for the rest of fall camp, and he'll probably end up getting that nod. But don't be surprised if Cam Miller overtakes him towards the end of the year. And then at the safety position, I think Kevin Winston's just incredible. He's one of the best safeties in the game. Had 61 tackles last year, which led the team. He had 0 missed tackles last year, which is
Wow.
incredible for a safety. That's unheard of. The only missed tackle that he had was called back on a penalty. So pretty impressive there. 1 interception, 5 pass breakups, not bad for a safety. 50% completion when targeted. And he's the only safety in the country, according to Pro Football Focus, to return with an 85 or higher grade in run defense and in coverage. So very versatile piece. He's exactly what you want out of a safety. Probably top 5 in the country. You're really shored up at that position. And then Jalen Reed, you'll see kind of play that safety role or kick down and play nickelback in the 4-2-5 defense that you mentioned. But he, had 48 tackles last year, 4 tackles for a loss, a sack, a pass breakup, 2 interceptions. Serviceable, you know what I mean? He's a great piece to add. Plays the run pretty well, so it makes sense to kick him down to nickel, try to get him as close to the football as possible, and really kind of brings this unit together as a whole. But I think this is going to be a really good unit. We've got some questions with the transfers coming over, questions at cornerback in general. I think that some services that I've listened to that are doing kind of what we're doing, just place AJ Harris as a lockdown cornerback, and he's for sure the starter and this and that. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I don't have any reason to doubt it, but he's unproven. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think that this should be a really good unit overall by the end of the season.
Show me on Saturdays. That's what we're going to have to do for AJ Harris. And not to say he can't do it. I got to see it on Saturday. 2024 schedule. This is a fun one, guys. And as we had talked about, you do drop off Michigan from the schedule, right? That's nice. You drop off Michigan, which I think you probably would have matched up better with than Ohio State this year. So maybe you wish you kind of swapped that game out. But nevertheless, you don't have to wait a long time for a really good Penn State game. Everybody is going to have their eyes yet again on the opener. This game was played last year, and Penn State was able to score over 30 points. And as I said earlier in the video, quarterback had a nice day against West Virginia last year. I think we'll probably see that again, although it is going to be in Morgantown, so that's going to be interesting to see. Bowling Green, Kent State, Illinois, UCLA, all at home. UCLA's reeling. They don't know what they're doing right now. I'd be surprised if they were worth a darn. Southern Cal away. That's going to be super interesting to go travel across the country and play somewhere that you just don't never play, right? There in October 12th. That's going to be something different for this Penn State team. I I can't pick Southern Cal to win any game right now, especially whenever I see the massive advantage that Penn State's going to have on the lines of scrimmage in that game. Uh, we saw Notre Dame, kind of a struggling offense, go and play USC last year and just absolutely destroy them. So I'm not picking a team that's as physical as Penn State is along the offensive and defensive line. I'm not picking USC to beat that team. There's no way. So I'm picking a win there. I think you start off the season 6-0. Then you've got Wisconsin on the road. We're gonna have to see what we're gonna have the whole first half of the season to see what Wisconsin is. I'm high on the returns of Wisconsin this year. I think we're gonna see some pretty good returns on Luke Fickell coaching over there. I think that's gonna be a good game, Mason. I think that one's gonna be a really good one. Um, and then you got Ohio State at home. That's going to be a hell of a scene there, November 2nd. Stadium will probably be looking like what it looks like right now on this picture on the screen. It's going to be packed to the gills, and boy, this is one hell of an Ohio State team, Mason. I'm having a hard time seeing Penn State being able to win that one. You got Washington at home. I feel like they're kind of down this year. I think you should be able to handle that. Purdue on the road, better be careful. Better be careful with that Purdue team. There are talented playmakers there, but I feel like Penn State can win that game. Minnesota on the road. I'm not a big Minnesota guy. But you know what? Admittedly, I don't know a ton about Minnesota. We haven't done a deep dive on them. Not going to do one. We're going to see what they look like in the beginning of the year, but we're not. I'm not thinking that Penn State's losing that game, and then you end the season at home against Maryland. Um, Mason, I see this as a 10-2 season. I think you lose to Ohio State for sure, and then almost every team in the country loses a game they're not supposed to. You could easily slip up and give a game away at the end of the season with Maryland. I could totally see that, although they've got a lot of changes going on over there. So I feel like that's less likely. The game against Wisconsin is the one that I think you probably lose where you're favored. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Penn State should be favored in that game, I would think, barring crazy injury or something unforeseen. Um, and not to mention you'll be already thinking about that Ohio State game. I'm thinking of you scrape your knee a couple of times there, transition from October to November, and then win out 10-2, and that's going to put you in a really good position, I would think, to make the college football playoff. Now, the only problem is you lose. You're gonna if things happen like I think they're going to happen, you lose to the two best teams that you play, and you'll be at the mercy of the college football playoff committee. But with all that being said, that's way down the road. I'm predicting 10-2 for this team. Mason, what's your predictions? What do you think about the schedule?
Yeah, I like where you're at. I think that West Virginia, playing West Virginia on the road, week one is a tricky game. Um, you're going to be figuring out a new offense, and West Virginia right now feels like they could beat anybody. They got tons of swag coming from that group, and just watch out, man. I'm telling you that Garrett Green could put up some numbers, and I
That
don't see
guy's
them
an
running.
enigma, man.
He is. He is. And I don't see them running the football, on Penn State or anything like that. But you get in a situation where, you're putting up 17 points on offense and you're going to be in a football game. And we'll just have to see what this Penn State offense, new Penn State offense is all about. I do think that they get the win there, but that's kind of a watch out game that I have circled earlier in the year. And then I think that they win the next five. I don't think that USC is going to pose much of a threat. Although if they hit on defense, then we're probably circling this game as a premier game in week. I guess it'd be week 7 at that point. But at this point in the season, I think that physically Penn State just outmatches USC, and that's going to be the difference in that game. They get a bye week between USC and Wisconsin, and that's interesting because you get a bye week, and then you got to go play Wisconsin and Ohio State. So how you manage those 14 days in between is critical because you can't just you can't split between Wisconsin and Ohio State and then think that you're giving Wisconsin your full attention because you're not. You've got to use 99% of that time to focus on Wisconsin and win that game, right? Or just getting better as a team, generally normal practice stuff. But I don't think that you need to be looking ahead to Ohio State for 4 days out of that time. Like that shouldn't happen. I don't think it will. But you also have to figure there will be some time set aside for Ohio State, some film study and things like that. But I think the coaches should worry about that. Let the players worry about Wisconsin there, and if they do that, I think that they do take care of business against Wisconsin. It will be a tough environment at Camp Randall on the road, but I think that Penn State kind of just matches up with the Wisconsin team a little bit better, has more Jimmies and Joes, and plays a similar style of football. If we're talking about a tough, game being played here in the running attack specifically between these two programs, I'm going to give Penn State the slight edge. And then Ohio State, look, you get Ohio State at home, right? You're going to have the whiteout game at home this year. It's going to be really exciting. Ohio State has a better team. Like I don't think I don't think anybody's heads are exploding when I say that for Penn State fans. Ohio State has a better team. They've got potentially the best team in the country this year. But if they don't hit on Will Howard at quarterback and you see this team, being a little bit more run heavy with Will Howard, I think they're going to be in trouble against Penn State because
That's a good point.
You're not going to run on this team. Like that's if I could find a perfect case scenario for Penn State to win this football game, it's that at this point in the season, Will Howard's only got about 1,000 yards passing, maybe 1,200 yards passing or something like that, and they're trying to use him as a dual threat. That's not going to work against Penn State. He's going to have to go over the top, and hey, at that point in the season, maybe he's not able to do it. Maybe he's not the guy, and Penn State gets a win there at home. Not calling that, but if I were to give you a recipe for success against Ohio State, that would be it. And then of course the next 4 games, I think that they're going to win out. So I've got this as an 11-1 team. I could definitely see them dropping a game against. Really, to me, it's Wisconsin, USC, and West Virginia. Those are the only 3 that I see being problematic. Purdue's going to sneak up and get somebody, but I don't think it's going to be Penn State. They're just not there roster-wise yet. But yeah, 11-1. I think this is a college football playoff team. Even at 10-2, I think it's a playoff team. But it's going to be really interesting. Really interesting year for Penn State, and getting not getting Michigan this year, I think is going to be huge for this team.
Yeah, that's nice. There you have it, folks. There's our Penn State Nittany Lions preview for the 2024 season. If you haven't checked it out yet, we hope that you will. Go check out our video library and just go check out some of the breakdowns that we've done. Several of the opponents that are on your schedule, we've already done, and by the time this is released, it'll only be a matter of a couple of days before Ohio State's released and things like that. So we've got tons of breakdowns that we've already done. I believe we've done about 30 of them already, and we're making our way to number 1. We hope that you will hit subscribe, come hang out with us, follow along. You'll be a better college football fan because of it, and you'll be the guy at the water cooler that's got all the facts and knows all the teams. We're going to do live shows this year throughout the whole season, just like we did last year, only better. And we're going to do prediction shows. We're going to do our whole analytics thing where we're, breaking down all the teams. We're going to do reactions. Those are some of our favorite shows. But my favorite show of all is the betting show that we do. That's Between the Lines. We're going to bring that back as the season gets started there we'll bring it back the week before the season gets started so you can get all your bets in. If you like to bet on college football like we do, please come and hang out with us. Hit that subscribe button. We hope you'll consider doing that. But for now, signing out for First and Long College Football Show, I'm Marcus. That's Mason, and we'll see you next time.